All right, I just hit the button by accident and we are live.
Well, hello. Welcome to a newly named portion of Thulian Transmission. This is Grizzly. I'm with Willavar. We have Alex and Dagus as well. Everybody say hi this Friday evening.
What's up, everyone?
How's it going, guys?
Yeah, so this is a new show kind of format, which we've kind of done a little bit in the past. It's called Fuel to the Fire, and we've kind of mentioned previously that these are just kind of chill streams, and whatever topic comes up, we'll talk about. And in these streams, usually at the end of it, we would love to have anyone who's interested come on to ask questions or to just have a chat with us.
Looks like we lost Will already, so we're off to a good start. But yeah, we've been trying to kind of come up with the right name for what we're doing. We were calling some of these hangout streams from the Heath, but that's kind of more of a pro pagan mythology type of show that we used to do. So we didn't really want to kind of mix up that name. So I went back, renamed a lot of the old hangout streams that we did to Fuel to the Fire. The idea is that this is just kind of like a fireside chat, right? But it's a little bit higher energy, and the takes are a little hotter. So that's
one of the hot takes I came up with in regards to the name was bonfire chats. Let me know if you guys love it or you hate it. Let me know just in the comments.
Yeah, press 0 for bonfire chats or press 2 for Fuel to the Fire.
Both are really good names. I just want to point out, but I did come up with one name already.
Well, we had somebody. It was actually somebody in our chat that came up with the Fuel to the Fire name, and it seemed pretty good. So we're gonna go with that.
Well, I like that already. But yeah, so as Dagus was saying, it's I think we're gonna save some of these other named shows for different topics and kind of areas of discussion. This is just our chill stream for tonight.
Yeah, and I know the people out there that have been watching consistently, I know the branding that we're doing is kind of confusing, so just bear with us. I think we finally got it figured out. So, don't get confused by all the show names, but we're gonna keep it kind of steady from here on out. I think.
We can only hope, really.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come up with like 3 more show names before the end of the month, but it's all going to be sorted in the end.
So I thought on this show, since it's just kind of an informal hangout stream, we could kind of go into contemporary topics a little bit more than we usually do. We usually try to steer away from the e-drama or the normal news cycles, but there's been a little bit of Twitter drama going on, and we were just kind of talking about it backstage. None of us are really involved in it, but it is interesting. It is interesting, kind of this split that's happening with different groups. Who wants to kick that off? Who wants to get that conversation going?
Well, as Dagus said, it is kind of e-drama, and we usually do steer away from that. But contemporary topics and drama aren't off the table with this one. But what I've seen recently, I think within the last few weeks maybe, is a couple of factions splitting in the pro-Eurosphere that kind of branch in 2 directions. And what those 2 directions just generally are is some people want to focus pretty much entirely on our people, and you can have external politics and be kind of involved with global politics to a degree, but still like maintaining the focus on Europe and America and Australia and the kind of Euro diaspora apart from Europe. And then on the other sphere, there's a faction that has been broaching kind of an alliance with Palestine or an alliance with the enemies of a certain Jewish tribe, the Jewish tribe in Israel, and also kind of broaching the topic of Karl Marx and things that we could learn from Marx and then perhaps use. It's kind of vague. I haven't actually seen what we're meant to use, and I think anyone who knows me probably knows which side I'm already leaning on that.
Yeah, you're making it pretty obvious already.
Yeah.
But before we spell out exactly what this Twitter beef is all about, I want to welcome on Reverend. Reverend, are you going by Reverend now, or are you going by another name? What do you want us to call us tonight? Call you tonight? Can we get a sound check?
I mean, you could call me whatever you want, just not late for dinner, you know. But no, I mean, I could switch it back to Dranger or whatever. Reverend, it doesn't matter to me. But I don't even know.
Waves back. The gang's back together.
Yeah.
Pretty stacked crowd we have for a Friday night. I like to see that.
Well, Reverend, thanks for joining us.
Call him Dranger.
Well,
Can you guys hear me? By the way, sorry, I disconnected from Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we can hear
Sounds
you.
like you're walking in the woods or something.
Yeah, you're like in the jungle somewhere.
Yeah, I'm literally in the jungle, literally in the fucking jungle. Let's hop in my car really quick. No, but so Twitter beef, people wanting to add Marxism to the list of what? Like they're wanting to use like dialectical revolutionary analysis, or what are they looking for? Is it some like quasi red-brown alliance or something?
I'm not really sure, but I think what they're attempting, which I think there's a couple guys I won't really get into, but
no, you got to name names for the fans. I'm just going to spit it out. So what we're talking about is the NPI crowd versus promoting or going around Twitter calling people racist liberals, which I'm actually laughing my ass off at. I got to say, I think it's funny as hell, but creating, stirring the pot, creating the infighting might not be for the best. The little bit of laughs that we get out of it might not be totally worth it. So.
Wait, you're telling me that the ultimate bourgeois, nationalist, racist liberals, the MPI crowd, are going out and projecting their own actions onto others. That's rich. That's rich as hell.
It's Richard, actually.
It's Richard and crowd. I mean,
that's dick for you.
Yeah. So there's a couple, and then I guess the faction split is between basically, I guess, the Keith Woods, Richard Spencer, TDS crew on one hand, and then you have the RC, the kind of more traditional Euro kind of centrism on the other side.
Who else are they attacking, Grizzly? It's not just racial.
It's philosophy. I mean, it's Philosophat. There's RC. There's Wild Rich, who writes for what is that publication? Kayla, help me out in chat. Daily Current, or no? Is that no? What is that publication called? I'm having a brain fart. I'll come back to you on that.
Countercurrents.
Yes, that's the one. Countercurrents. So he writes articles for that. He's actually a really good author, and he brings up some really great points and does really good research. But
Greg Johnson specifically is being attacked, or one of his guys?
No, it's not him. It's one of his guys, one of his writers, who I follow on Twitter. He's always making. I mean, their Eurocentrism is quite laudable, and there you go. I used that word again for you, Will. But it's something that's I think is really respectable and kind of noble. But yeah, they're being attacked, and it just doesn't look like for any really good reason. So
well,
I guess
didn't this stem from like the whole Palestine thing, like siding with Palestinian struggle against Zionism, the Zionist expansion?
Well, it's just it's that, and a kind of a more of a focus around support for Palestine as opposed to some other efforts, and also a focus, I guess, on some Marxist talking points, which I still haven't wrapped my head around. Alex, can you add to that?
I guess there was one video that I found interesting.
Well, I mean, what was your stance on it though, Grizzly? Like, didn't you say you weren't like a big fan of it? Didn't you say that you thought it was pretty gay and you didn't think it was like a kind of a good route to go down?
I don't think it's really constructive in the long run. There's so many that can focus on these other points that aren't our people, and I'd really rather them leave it up to that and just kind of focus on us, because we're the only advocates for our own people. So that's my take on that. I think it's a distraction.
What can be learned from Marxism, if anything, is kind of what I was about to get into. Is like
Dice is taking a long piss.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Keith Woods made a video not too long ago where he showed a bunch of quotes of Karl Marx, but basically
And
talking.
Alex Bouncers, he's still in here.
Well, I
Alex
think
is
that thing's
talking right
happening
now.
again, where you can hear some
Can you
people
guys
but
hear
not
me?
everybody. Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you. Alan.
Alex, you're fine. Will, do you
okay.
want to quit and
Fuck.
rejoin?
Yeah, hold on
Yeah,
a second.
just rejoin. So you were talking about one of the recent Keith Woods videos, Alex?
Yeah, where he showed a collection of different quotes by Karl Marx, where he talked about blacks, and he was basically making racist comments. And like, I mean, Karl Marx wrote an article on Judaism and capitalism. So, I mean, my question is, why? I mean, it's a fun little nugget, or it's nice information to have, but I mean, but what really? Right? I mean, what does it matter? I mean, yes, I mean everyone in that age would had some type of racist viewpoints. Does
Well,
that? Oh, go ahead.
I could actually see the utility. I gotta state it right out. I'm not speaking for the rest of you guys, but I absolutely hate anyone that's associated with NPI and that ilk. But beyond that, like I will say that talking about different racial disparities and all those like racial comments, people like Marx and Castro and people like that, those people that are touted by leftists as their like symbols of equality and justice, etc. Showing them that they're super racist like strips away their identity, which I think that's actually useful in a way. And I mean, it just shamed them, like hold the enemy to their own standards, essentially. Although like I said, I don't support MPI and all that. Now, beyond that, though, I do believe that there is some utility in what is essentially Hegelian or Marxist analysis of like social conditions and dialectic. So I do think there's utility in that, but like the actual like theoretical aspects to Marxism are like all bullshit,
So I think we can all agree that the Marxist critiques of capitalism are legit. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the critiques of capitalism he makes. As far as trying to paint Marx as a racist, I think that we have to remember that this message is not for us, right? This is what these NPI guys are trying to do is they're trying to court the left right now, and they're going
Which
about
is
it in a
ridiculous. They
very
think they're going to get Bernie Bros on our side, which you can do in
Yeah.
many ways. One of the weakest ways I can imagine is try to go at it in this method.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's
what
fun
you're
to watch
essentially
them
doing-
try.
what they're essentially, at least what they're seemingly trying to do. I haven't seen any of this content, and I don't pay attention to them. But by showing Marx and all these other people as like racist or anti-Semites or whatever they want to say, they're basically stripping away these people's talking points and validity and showing that they're hypocritical, which is going to kind of take a little bit of a gusto out of the opposition, But I think that's even like a failed strategy, because we've seen before that they don't hold themselves to the same standard, and they're going to brush off things like that regardless.
Yeah, exactly. 100% agreed with that point.
Yeah, like what the left was 40, 50 years ago is basically what the conservatives are now. And the left, how many times has Martin Luther King's name come up? They've kind of moved away from that whole merit-based equality, and moved more further towards sort of the
It's race politics now. They've gotten out of the mode of kind of equality for all, and it's more just about promoting racial interests of the lower castes. That's kind of how I see it.
And for the last 2 decades, that's the way the left has been going. So for anyone to try to court that and still pretend that you're going to have some semblance of draw to these people is just laughable in my opinion.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting because they're just getting started with this strategy. So I think that Marx is basically dead at this point, in the sense that even regular leftists aren't just going to Marx for their talking points. There have been these other thinkers that have built on top of Marx that are more relevant and fitting to contemporary politics. So I don't see the left as like deeply embedded in Marx, whereas if you tear down Marx, it's going to demoralize them. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But it's going to be interesting to see where these guys go as they start running into obstacles with this attempt to court the left. I'd like to see where they go next, right? It's like, okay, so they're first going to try that angle of like calling anybody with libertarian sentiments racist liberals. That's like trying to meme these guys and these trad posters into oblivion by calling them racist liberals. And ultimately, what they think that they're going to do is they're going to like surgically cut the libertarianism out of the movement. I don't know if that's possible.
One thing on that point
that's kind of good, right?
One thing that
Mhm.
Lusos brought up in one of our conversations, I think you remember, Dagus, was using words created by enemies to our own pro-Eurosphere is really seedy, in my opinion. It's really kind of devious and really counter.
Yeah, but they're not saying racist liberal in the sense where it's like they're calling you a racist and you have to kneel down. They're taking the Lolbert thing and they're taking it one step further, where it's like you can't even. They're trying to take away that you can't even stand on individualism or libertarianism anymore. We're just going to laugh at you as kind of like a slightly edgy liberal cuck, right? That's where they're going with this.
Basically, they're saying that you're like steeped in enlightenment philosophy, but you also have like reactionary sentiments towards other races.
Exactly.
Which is
Really
it's funny,
yeah.
but the main person they're attacking is a self-avowed third positionist who espouses those beliefs. So it's just kind of confusing.
Well, it's interesting
something
though,
I have
because
found. Something I have
Right.
found though is that the majority of people that like label themselves as third positionists really don't have a deep philosophical understanding of their own positions, and they don't have a clear understanding of what third position means. And I think oftentimes it does mean racist liberal or racist libertarian or whatever they want to say,
Yeah, I mean, from this one person's take, RC, that I know, I've never seen any of that. I think he knows his position pretty well and sticks to it. But yeah.
Okay, the
I
memes
know
are
that
kind of
point.
funny though. So Keith has some guy that's going out and making these memes, or like kind of attacking people, and it is pretty funny. It's like, hail, man of Europa of Hyperborean descent, thou shalt take the 7-Elevens back into the. I don't know. Maybe somebody else can do it better, but they're kind of memeing how we used to make fun of Gavin McGinnis for wanting to go back to the 80s. Basically, they're memeing that like trad posting is trying to like retake 90s American culture, and it's not what these guys are doing, but it's still. I'm sorry, it just makes me laugh.
The 7-Eleven memes are funny, but that article, if you read it, is pretty accurate. And again, I think this guy's really attached to. That guy in particular is pretty attached to the 80s, so I'll just say that, just because looking at his aesthetics, that's pretty true. So that's a little bit humorous, but other critiques, I just don't really understand why they're doing. I mean, it's not. Maybe I'm too much of a boomer, but it's really not winning me over with their irony
Grizzly,
posting.
a couple guys that you like are kind of getting attacked for no reason, maybe. So I can understand why you're pretty dead set against this. I'm more of the ilk that I want to see where this goes. I know that infighting is bad, but I also think that this has a bit of a chance to shift the Overton window to where people who think that they've escaped libertarianism and really haven't are going to get fucking railed. And I'm kind of excited for that, to be honest.
So the funny thing is like I'll use a little Marxist line to describe what's going on. Like infighting itself is not bad, and there's this concept of the negation, meaning seemingly contradictory positions battling it out in group in order to reach a synthesis, right? It's dialectical analysis and dialectical conflict, and it's actually always good for the group, and every like revolutionary group has used it like since the beginning of time, essentially. Like Mao, Pol Pot, all of them. Even there was even negation of the negation inside, like what do you say, like the revolution of the 1930s in Germany, and so I mean, it's not a bad thing. I think infighting is actually like inherently good. I don't consider myself like in group with those people, though. I think they're kind of, to me, they're just like, queers. But
Yeah,
also,
I would say that. Go ahead, Alec.
Yeah, and also I think it was useful, like you mentioned earlier, like what type of rhetoric or policies might appeal to leftists who kind of may be on the fence in regards to the racial question. And I think like topics such as universal health care and other social policies would be the way to go in regards to that. Um, so yeah, it's
Well, that's actually what Spencer's putting out there right now. That's what he's signaling to the broader group. Is he's saying that that the goal now is to try to win over basically the Bernie Bros by becoming the champions of UBI. I don't know if that
That
tactic's
is
going to
so
work
gay.
either, but
LOL.
Okay,
yeah,
I want to say that is like the most egotistical, far-fetched plan I've ever heard. And do you know, like they always tout this thing like the Red Brown Alliance, and they don't even understand that the Red Brown Alliance never existed, never existed. The Red Brown Alliance is really Yaki's idea of uniting Arab, and non-Arab countries against Israel. That was all it was. It wasn't.
That's
It
what
wasn't
they're
like a
trying to do.
communist.
That's still
Yeah.
what they're trying to do.
that's
No, but
it.
they're
Yeah,
trying
that's
to
the
they're trying to
strategy.
court the left though. They don't they didn't court the left. They don't
Well, they're
promote
doing both. They're doing the
doing
same
both.
thing too.
They're doing the
trying to
exact
be
same
pro
thing, yeah.
Palestine
Pro
at the same
Palestine
time.
confirmed.
Yeah.
Which is, but
So-
it didn't work. It didn't work. Like if you understand the history of this thing, that did not work in the slightest. Not
Well, that's my
it
Well,
did
why
not
didn't
work.
it work
was
though,
a
Dranger? Go into it
exercise
because
in
I think
futility.
the
Because,
reason
okay,
that it
I'll tell
doesn't
you
work
why.
is because nobody else takes our side, right? We give
Yeah.
and then they give us nothing back.
No. Oh, we don't. Well, the thing is, we don't have anything to offer them. We don't have anything to
Yeah,
offer those people.
exactly.
And guess who has something to offer them? It's the enemies. So the enemies will inherently win them over no matter what. If they wanted to, they could immediately align themselves with the Palestinians and give them money, and they would immediately be on their side. So it's not anything about that. It's like the power of resource ownership is what wins people like that over. You know, you don't win them over through rhetoric. You win them over through
Yeah.
hard resource power, and that's what the enemy has. And so you can never ally yourself if you don't have a reason for the alliance on the other side. You know, it's game theory.
That's a good
101.
point. That's a good point, Drenger, and it's also why the conservatives are going to have always failed to win over minority voters, right? Is they don't have anything to offer. They're not going to give them the Gibbs or the social programs or the societal benefits that the left is. So just trying to win them over with free market idealism is not going to ever fucking work. And I think it's kind of a parallel to what you're describing.
Yeah, and in the end, it's the same thing with conservative is going to happen with this effort. It's just going to keep capitulating, trying to draw in more people, and then basically changing the fundamental makeup of whatever movement you're trying to initiate.
That's why. Okay, that's why movementarianism is a failed strategy. That's why. Like, I mean, Jonathan Bowden hit it pretty hard, hit the nail on the head in his speech. Hope for future vanguardism, and anything that you should do in regards to like political or zeitgeist change should be directed towards like a vanguard approach and not some sort of like mass movement, because there is no such thing as a mass movement. It is a
Wouldn't you
lie.
say that's the same thing, Drenger? Wouldn't you say
No.
there's
vanguardism
always-
is still a little bit more of a movementarianism streak than like say like maybe if we're opposing it to like siege style philosophy where it's a little more lone wolf.
I mean,
But there's always a collection of these types of movements in any type of, on the left or right. Like the Republicans, you have like the softest version of, of the right, and then you get a little further to the out to like the vanguard types with the American nationalists, and then you get to like you say a third positionist or whatever, and then you get it keeps moving further and further, but like you have sort of this collection anyways, and they all kind of working for they're trying to meme their ideas out there the best way they can, even though they may not be on the same page completely, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, this is my whole critique with like say the opposition ideology, which a lot of people do kind of try to use as like maybe more so the siege type, where they kind of contrast lone wolfism with maybe even vanguardism. I would say that if we're kind of analyzing history, I would like to see people maybe show me examples of where lone wolf siege style politics or actions led to anything. Because when I'm looking out through history, I don't really see any examples of those types of things being effective on a mass or large scale.
Right, and history would back that up. They would basically say, you know, these people that some might consider vanguardist or lone wolves. It wasn't that they created an entire movement, and then they basically enacted their will to power, so to speak.
Well, I mean, you could say the South American revolutions and such were a pretty good example of like kind of what we're talking about, right? And also, I mean, in essence, the IRA did that. The every single like quasi proxy group in the Middle East, such as like the Taliban or ISIS, used those same exact tactics for their operations and such, and were able to gain significant amount of power and resources through that.
So would
And
you label them more like vanguard movements, or
yes,
would you, okay, then I agree with you on that. Then I
yeah.
am an advocate for more vanguardism than
Now the
other
problem
things.
with the U.S. if you're using like the problem with the first world, if you're using like that analytical mindset, is that it's not in the position that the third world is. Whereas the third world, that can happen, you can operate in manners of that fashion, but in the first world, you really can't. You really can't at all. You can't operate in that way because the state has a extreme monopoly on violence and extreme monopoly on order, and so you have nothing to offer the populace in any way, and so you can't really do that in the first world. That's why you kind of have to wait till some
Yeah,
sort
basically
of
until it becomes so bad that they have
yeah
no option.
yeah, and everything that you do until then is just essentially an exercise in futility.
Yeah, and the way that I see it is with those like types of vanguard movements, if we're going to use that term, what they end up doing is when they've already seized power, then they try to win over the masses by doing like charity works for them or something like.
And
I'm
propaganda.
thinking of like, yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of like Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? They basically were kind of fringe until Lebanon started getting bombed and fucked up by Israel, and then they go on the offensive against Israel and they win the people over and they start, moving, distributing supplies in the city, and they ended up kind of winning over the will of the people and becoming prominent because of that, because they had that opportunity when there was a bit of social disorder and chaos in society. That's when they were able to step up. While
And that's the
Lebanon was
key.
orderly, and the trash was getting picked up regularly, and there was nothing for the citizens to worry about. They were completely irrelevant. But the moment that chaos struck that society, they stepped up to the plate and they actually seized power in a real type of way.
Well,
Yeah,
that's literally the key to it all. Sorry, go ahead, Grizzly.
no, I was just mentioning Saxon in the chat has really good points. When you start with quality or quantity over quality, you're gonna fail. You have to start a movement, or you have to start something with the highest cream of the crop you possibly can, and those movements take a long time to kind of
We
generate
might even
power.
call that an aristocratic class.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Be able
and
to lead.
I want to stress that is not going to happen on the national scale in the U.S. Neither is that going to happen. Well, it won't happen on the national scale in the U.S. until it happens in a local scale, like a regional scale. You're not going to have national politics until you have local politics, regional politics, etc. You're not going to have national movements until you have legitimate regional and local movements. All that shit. So it's like putting the cart before the ox almost, and we're just not going to get that from the internet. You cannot have discipline. You cannot have real. You really can't choose the people that you're interacting with necessarily in a cyber setting, right? And so I don't know. It's interesting stuff to talk about, and I think what we're really doing is like hashing out ideas with it. But I do think that a lot of people are putting the cart before the horse, especially that MPI crowd and all the whole entire crowd. I think in all of the Western world is like ignoring the fact that you have to have legitimate regional and local groups, political movements, etc., in order to have any sort of like nationwide or worldwide group.
Yeah, and you're seeing some wins in that. Just as a white pill, I'm seeing some wins in that in the scans of countries as well. They're making some headway, which I'm in favor of.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So what would you guys say that some of the current strains of ideology that you're seeing in our circles that need to be cut away for us to kind of move forward with some of these ideas that we're playing with? Like, Give me
I
some
think we
examples
all
of
know
maybe
the answer.
some. Well, I mean, I think there's more than one answer, but give me some examples
Yeah.
from what your guys' perspective, some ideologies that need to be put to rest for us to move forward with new shit. Because when I'm looking around, I'm seeing a
Big
lot of people
tentism.
spouting. Well, when I look around, I've seen people spouting a lot of the same shit, and there's not any real progress or evolution in their thought. And obviously, I don't mean anybody in here, but you know what I mean, like people like without outside of our circles and stuff.
Well, that's one of the advantages of what we're doing in here is we're just kind of brainstorming on these things. We're not taking a position that we're stuck, advocating for years on end. So we're kind of able to be nimble in our thought and kind of
One might say we're
work our way
fluid.
forward into. Yeah, exactly. We've got some kind of agility in our thought, and we're kind of trying to work our way to those things. We're not just picking one ideology and then week after week advocating the same thing, right? We're kind of in development is kind of how I see it.
Pragmatism is the underlining factor that I'm seeing kind of with us at least.
You guys want to go around the room and everybody gives one
Yeah, let's start with
philosophy that
Alex
they want to
because I
see
feel.
dead?
I start with Alex because I feel that we've. I've
Give
been
the man
talking about.
a minute to prepare.
Oh,
I can't say for sure. I mean, there's certain, I'd say like blind racism type of thing. I mean, although that does have like benefits for certain segments of the population, but I think that like getting away from like the 1950s types of racism, and um, it's sort of it really we need to sort of develop an idea of what it means to be European and like our place in the world and sort of in cultivating that sense of identity. I think that that's important. I don't I think that too many people like it's too easy to be sucked into like the you find on many conservative types they have sort of this hatred of Muslims, but if you were to ask them why that is, they wouldn't have any clue. And it's it really it's easy for people like Dennis Prager and Dinesh D'Souza to play off of that and to play and to use that ultimately against the voting base that they claim to be advocating for.
yeah.
So that's my take.
Well, here on
So
that, I agree with that.
Alex, you're telling me that you don't have a "Joggers Not Welcome" sign on your house?
I would say the "Joggers Not Welcome" is actually an improvement. At least we're kind of used to, the euphemisms actually do. There's some thinking involved there, which I appreciate a little more than
Reminds me of that meme I saw where it goes on a bell curve of like the lowest IQ says, like racism, and then
It's definitely
middle
low
one
tier,
is
but I
like,
still
would
think
actually-
it's funny as fuck to me.
I
know
would
it's
actually-
corny, but
I know I would kind of disagree. I would kind of disagree with you. I think that a destabilizing factor in a multicultural system is in fact that like very reactionary racism that you're talking about, that like internal conflict between different groups. And I think that has to be stoked and promoted and stressed and pushed as far as we can, so that there is a literal irreconcilable conflict from that. And I think that's actually a strength that we should exploit. And so kind of, I don't know, writing it off as like
but you can do
something
that in
to be-
different ways, though. You can do that in many.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alex
many
is
different
talking
ways.
about the vulgar expression of it, the lowly guttural expression of it, as opposed to kind of the more sophisticated. So he wouldn't like your Confederate flag dude in a truck yelling it out of a window, but if Jared Taylor yells it out of his Bentley, he's all on board.
But I do
okay.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, though, is that I think race baiting is a way that we should actually we should race bait. Absolutely. I think it's effective. It works. And I think that any politician who's going to try to do something should rely on that. But they need to discuss it in a way in which does not the kind of distances themselves from the stereotypical type of racist that you kind of that most people think of when they think of what we people like us, how we look at the world. And I think that focusing more on European identity, we're not just Americans. We have a history that goes much further back, and I think that would be more effective. Like, and also getting away from the egalitarian type of race questions.
One thing I like to shout in the streets, just at the top of my lungs on any given Sunday, is equality is a lie.
Don't lie, dude. You just yell out, "Love your people."
Well, I still say, love your people.
Well, it sounds like Alex is kind of in agreement with Grizzly in the sense that they think that it's important to advocate. I mean, we still. I'm not against hate. I think emotions are all good in different various forms. But
one form
hold
of
on,
hate
hold on.
that's
I was
even
gonna
stronger.
say though, is that Grizzly and Alex are on the same page in terms of emphasizing a love for your folk rather than a hatred of others. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, I would say just to kind of color that a little bit more. When you have love and you have that entire history and that ancestral kind of veneration and that embodiment of that elan vital or biospirit, as some people would say, when you have that, your rage is even more righteous and it's even more hot than just
Well,
a
I think
blind
there could be
kind of race.
there could be a logical synthesis of what you're talking about and what Dranger's advocating for, talking about in the sense of how he was saying that it might be beneficial to use people's emotions in these situations,
Well,
which
if you
I
don't use
don't disagree
emotion,
with.
then you don't have a real movement. So that's 100% true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no right. I mean, there's no either or in my opinion. I think there should be a synthesis of the two because I think they're both beneficial to this situation.
Yeah, I would just show that meme again, but no one got my reference.
I got it. I laughed a little bit.
Good.
But Grizzly, you're up at the mic. If there was one philosophy you got to cut down right now, what would it be? What needs to go in your opinion?
Christianity, Catholicism,
Based.
foreign ideology, playing the role and leading our people down a false path, not embodying who we actually are and kind of walking around that and nitpicking it and saying that our ancestors were barbarians. This kind of thing does not create a cohesive people. This creates a divided people with no root and no foundation in which to want to survive.
What about sitting in lotus and playing the sitar? Are you against that?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so that's what I'm doing right now, actually.
Damn it, Pranger.
He's
I'll
doing it in
stop.
front of that portrait that he got.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
What I will say about that, I'm sorry, I'm disagreeing. Like, I'm at least like critiquing things that people are saying. No, like I understand the sentiment of that, but I do believe that there is a large demographic of both Catholics and Christians that need to be pushed towards anti-system politics, and it's a great time to do that as the system is failing. So I see a utility in that. In the same way that I see a utility in
I'm not a
absolute,
Carolinite.
like,
I'm not a
racism,
Carolinite.
right?
So
yeah.
So I'm not of the mindset that we completely write off like the majority of our population because they happen to believe something that I don't.
Yeah.
I totally disagree with that mindset. I still really want to critique.
As do I. I think they just need better propaganda to lead their feeble minds because most people are stupid and they can't come to some of these conclusions by themselves. So if they're gonna let Jews and shit lead them, they need proper people who have a little more, how should I say, radical perspective.
A little more hateful, a little bit more of a hateful message I've seen in those Catholic circles recently. I just got to say it.
By the way, I have to say that's a pretty based Catholic icon you got on your profile picture.
Thanks. Yes, of course, it's 100% Catholic. But okay, so I think.
Just to respond real quick. So yes, I agree. I think if you just write off those people, then you're shooting yourself in the foot in the long run.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I still have to criticize it because it was not an invention for or of our people, and it's harmful, in my opinion.
What were you gonna say, Dranger?
Dranger's up.
Well, I was gonna say, and this is my own personal pet peeve, and people are probably gonna disagree with it, but like, first of all, number one is American identity, and what goes hand in hand with that is liberalism. So liberalism and American
You're not going to get any
identity.
disagreement by anyone here.
Yeah,
Wait, so you're
I know.
saying you don't love the founding fathers? You're not welcome
No.
back here anymore.
And I've been running into a lot of people that are seemingly like, quote, our guys that are just like flaming American identitarians, and it is a dangerous, bad path to go down. It's completely reactionary. It's completely conservative. It's that whole like press escape to go back bullshit, and it
You
just
know
does
why
not
that
work.
is, though? There's a certain underlying factor that I know you know that's part of the equation here that a lot of these people believe. It's not just the American identityism. There's a certain ideology that's attached to this that
Yep.
they have, and
It's
I know you know what it is.
It's the disgusting Protestants. Legitimately, Anglo-Protestantism is a serious problem that needs to be deconstructed, confronted, and destroyed at every turn. It is
I would
a
say it's
horrible
Christianity in
consumer
general.
capitalist mechanism.
I was gonna say Christianity in general, but I'll give you that. But I mean, look at the Knickers crowd. They're all Catholics, and they're pushing the same shit. So.
Well, they're conservatives. Yeah, they're faggots. Yeah. But
Yeah, I've been making the point for a couple weeks, or I've said it a couple times on different streams lately, that I think that while I consider Jared Taylor to be a saint, I think that we basically have to dump that platform. That Americanism stuff, I don't think is very effective, and I think you guys can remember
Needs to
clips of
die.
it. Does
Needs to die
it's run its
quickly.
course and it got nowhere, and you guys probably remember back in like the 90s or early 2000s when Jared was making the rounds and going on like Phil Donahue and who's Geraldo. He's going on all these dates. Maybe he even went on Oprah. I can't even remember. No, not Oprah. But point is, people would try to pin him on the National Socialist thing or on the Hitler question or the Holocaust, and he'd go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! My ideology has nothing to do with European politics." And honestly, that was a cop out, and I think that's where he'd lose the audience when he'd start speaking. When he'd start saying, "My ideology has nothing to do with European history or has no connection whatsoever to any of these fascist ideologies of the early 19th or the early 20th century." I think that was a point of weakness that he was constantly attacked on, and he didn't come up with a good answer for it. Just trying to say that my political philosophy is 100% American centric and has nothing to do with the rest of the world is not sufficient.
And something else I need to point out about Jared Taylor specifically, a lot of people don't know this, but he has for a long time co-signed a lot of people that are like brutally philo-Semitic, and I think people notice like a lot of the American Renaissance expositions that they had, there would be many quote-based Jews that would be talking politics on there, and not only that, he published Guillaume Fay's books, and if people have actually read them, they would know why that's a problem for me, because in Ethnic Apocalypse, which Jared Taylor wrote the foreword for and also published it in the English-speaking world, he calls for a Judeo European and a white American alliance with Jews against everybody else. Now, this is a fucking problem, obviously. And the Nouvelle Droit is historically, the French New Right is historically bad at choosing allies. And literally co-signing a theoretical book called Ethnic Apocalypse that promotes the idea that we have to protect the Jews was really like one of the first times I realized that Jared Taylor was a serious issue, and Americanism itself is a serious issue.
Yeah,
we've got to dump them. We've got to dump it.
Well, and I know.
This
Yeah,
reminds
Jared
me
Taylor,
of that whole thing you were talking about, Daggis, the smashing, when Nietzsche was talking about smashing your idols.
Yeah, Twilight
That's
of
why
the
we bring
Idols.
Dranger on. That's why we bring Dranger on. He's here to smash all the alt-right idols, basically.
Twilight of the Idols, or How to Philosophize with the Hammer. I really, really liked that title.
I legitimately like I've my Mafashy girl asked me who do you like, and I said no one. Because they're literally all they're either all queers, charlatans, or Jew lovers, and so I'm not going to align myself with any of them. Like, we can go on down the list.
You're talking about current, right? Not like all time, right?
Not all time. Not all time.
Yeah,
No, of
I was
course.
like, God damn, dude, you're
The
fucking
majority of
contrarian as fuck
American, though.
tonight.
No.
There is
Like,
there is an importance in deconstructing your idols, though. If you sometimes people are very eager and they fall into kind of an idol worship, and they can't really see their heroes for what they really are. And
Well, dude,
you
even
got
us
to
when we
be
were
really
talking
careful
about
with that.
even us how we like to cite Nietzsche a lot. We were talking about how we can even critique a lot of the shit that we don't like about Nietzsche's philosophy as well. So it's not like we're just like, you know, ass kissing Nietzsche all the time. There's a lot of shit that he talked about that we aren't really advocates for either. But no, I agree with you though. Nobody should be above critique.
All right. And with that, Will, you're up. If you had to cut down one philosophy, what would it be? Or any ideology or any
You
part
guys
of the
already
movement?
know. You guys already know what I'm gonna say. It's the Christianity shit has to die. And I know it's probably not going to happen, but I'm saying in terms of us moving forward and evolving as an ideology and philosophy, the Christian shit needs to die because I think that's one of the main things that's holding us back. And even observing other e-drama and beefs and stuff, like I do think that's one of the main underlying factors behind a lot of it as well, at least in my personal opinion. So,
Anybody got any comments on that?
Grizzly's about to simp for Christianity. He's getting out of the Bible.
All right. Well, then I guess I'm up last. And where I'm at right now is I'm against, I guess, what I would have to describe as petty nationalism. And hear me out on this. I've said this a couple times on stream already, but I am really against this idea that that we can't have any sort of broad, overarching, or pan-European thing, ideology, not necessarily movement, but ideology. And I'm so against. Some people are calling it bulldog nationalism in the English context, but it exists all over. I can't stand the idea of an white nationalist Irishman going, England deserves to die. I don't give two fucks about what happens to them. They're my historical enemies, so fuck their country.
Bro, dude, you just reminded me. Sorry for cutting. You just reminded me.
Go ahead.
I don't even give a fuck either. But that guy, fucking Brutus the Saxon, he does that same shit. Like he's like super hyper bulldog nationalist, and he talks shit on any other forms of white collectivization. He thinks that it needs to be isolated nationalist states.
Yeah. So a couple things that I've thought about that. So two things I've been reading lately. First was, Will, you turned me on to Abir Taha's Nietzsche, Prophet of National Socialism, and
You're welcome.
she. Yeah, no, that was a very good read. I recommend anybody go and either buy it or go look up. What is it? Vanguard University does an audiobook of it.
Yeah, Alex Linder has a good audio.
Yeah, if you Google Alex Linder, you'll find it. But this woman Abir Taha, she makes a very, very strong case that what the Third Reich was about was nationalism for the masses, but a sort of Aryanist globalism for what was actually their inner doctrine. And hear me out on this. The way that I kind of contextualized this was I understood nationalism as a racialist or pinging on racialist version of populism. So there can be a whole palette of types of populism that are out there. There's economic populism. There's workers' rights populism. There's healthy eating or getting more fit lifestyles populism. But nationalism is specifically sort of a pseudo-racial type of populism, and it works for mobilizing the masses. If you have a state under your control and you want to get them hyped up and mobilized for your whatever it is you're trying to enact, then going about and advocating sort of a nationalism in the sense of Britain first, Britain away from the EU, or Trump's America first. This is a very useful tool to get your people fired up. But ultimately, it has some extreme limitations to it, and it is sort of petty. And what the Nietzsche, Hitler, a lot of the upper ranking people in the Reich, what they were about was kind of a more global, kind of eugenic thing, where it was about the positive regeneration of racial character among kind of the elites of all these different countries. And their idea was that we're going to have this. We're going to start out with mobilizing Germany, but eventually this is going to be all of Europe, and then beyond that, it's going to expand to all of basically Eurasia, in the sense that like we're going to basically retake the homelands of the Indo-European peoples, right? If you guys look up those Aryan invasion maps, that is kind of the end goal of what the Reich thought that they were going to do. They were going to regenerate the racial character of everybody within those regions and turn them into better humans, at least the elites. Maybe they weren't worrying too much about the masses of each of those groups, but they wanted to put the best, highest, the best stock of people in the leadership positions of each of those places. So that's kind of my critique of nationalism as such. And then recently, kind of reading a little bit of Yaki, he's picking up where Spengler left off, and Spengler is, of course, really the one that really kind of created a system about how an organism degenerates and how societies and cultures degenerate. And he actually saw nationalism as part of degeneration of the European spirit. That Europe was no longer Europeans were no longer so much in love with themselves that they split off into, that they got partitioned into 150 different groups that were all warring with each other, rather than creating one body and working towards a greater goal.
Yeah, he posited that like petty nationalism, like you're talking about. This is Yaki posited that it's a form of deracination and ultimately capital consumerism. It's a deconstruction of divine and universal hierarchical order by merchants. So basically, once you reach the merchant state, where the bourgeois is in control, right? The bourgeois caste is in power. They create these petty nationalisms that are essentially nothing more than the aesthetic strip malls, all warring against each other for better economic positions.
Yeah,
and
I would say
the answer to that is blood and soil nationalism. That's the answer to that.
I agree with that. And that's one thing, a certain historical character during World War II had love for England and its people because he saw them as his people. And that's one
racial brothers, right?
Yeah, as racial brothers. And that's one thing. Like, I wouldn't advocate for removing identity and culture within certain areas of Europe, but you still need that collective. You still need that because the more we're atomized, the less chance we have, the less success we have. And it seems disastrous.
I'm sorry, but the Irish and the Scots need to stop thinking that they're two completely separate, distinct people. They need to come up with some sort of, they need to bond over that common identity. And I think that that's true with all of the nations of Europe and America and, the greater Anglosphere around the world. We need to work towards an idealism or political philosophy that can have strains that exist within all those different cultures. And where I stand right now is that I think some sort of Aryan idealism is probably that thing, but I haven't really hashed it all out yet. And I just want to say thanks, Dranger, for elaborating on that.
No problem.
You totally nailed all those points perfectly.
What I'll say, like adding on to that, like I agree with you that reaching a sort of honestly, like you're talking about this, like I hate saying the word pan-European, but reaching this point of commonality is only possible through like an authoritarian rational state structure. And so you're not going to be able to achieve that with the current zeitgeist, if you want to say that.
Part of that.
And you have to have it through like a Hegelian system of government.
Hierarchy. It's got to be hierarchy. You have to have a hierarchical system where people
because like I wouldn't, like, people say like Nietzsche is the father of National Socialism. I would encourage people to go farther into Foucault and Baudrillard to really have like a clear understanding of the 20th century movements and such, because culture, philosophy, beliefs, identity is a top-down structure. It's basically like a quote like simulation, right? And so in order to enact these things, you legitimately have to have power over all of the aspects of society that are like the progenitors of culture, you know?
Right, and part of that requisite, part of that as a requisite would be to remove those things which basically alienates your people, your brothers, your sisters, your blood and soil. Which in America that's like 1776, and then Britain's like, I hate Germany, and also I hate the Irish, and the Scots are like, the EU is where I should go because England sucks, and it's just. It's just so stupid.
Yeah, it's like that sentiment that, we kind of like to make fun of. Oh, well, at least we're not speaking German. Well, the thing that I think the way that we should be thinking of it was, maybe the Germans should have been the rightful inheritors of Europe. Maybe that culture was the best thing in Europe at the time, and maybe it would have made sense for other nations to sort of subordinate themselves to it. And I know that's kind of
at least Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe. I mean, that was basically the viewpoint of Germany. It was like they had their eyes on Eastern Europe, and Britain had its control over its colonies. So Britain rules the oceans, and Germany rules most of the European mainland.
This idea that every small tiny group deserves its independence, its national independence, I think is really absurd. And you can see that that's sort of the divide and conquer strategy that's employed over the Middle East right now. It's like, the U.S. empire and its main allies are they're fostering these separatist groups all over the Middle East because they want to break them up. They want to destroy the body by chopping off little pieces of it. So they convince, they spend a lot of energy convincing these, small ethnic groups that they're their own people and they deserve to have their own voice. And this is kind of nationalistic, really, the rhetoric that they're giving these different tribes in the Middle East. Like, you are your own sovereign people and you need to revolt against oppression and free yourselves. Well, what's really the difference in that? And then going and telling the Irish that they have no place in the United Kingdom, and that the English are their eternal enemy. I kind of see a problem there.
Yeah, it's kind of, you see kind of the same strain or like the same type of thinking involved in liberalism, and like the type of arguments made by the left today. It's it's like each individual has his particular character within a society. Each nationality has its particular character as well, but that does not mean that we are completely sovereign as individuals. Each nationality has regardless. I mean, certain nationalities have to subordinate certain degrees of
independence.
Yeah.
To other
ultimately,
nations.
Independence and sovereignty cannot be the end goals in and of themselves.
Yeah,
and I think that's where we break with the American tradition, is that the American nationalist stuff basically says that national sovereignty is the end in and of itself. And I think that that's very, very limited. And essentially, you have to at some point be willing to give up your sovereignty to join a greater body. I mean, should Florida really be its own country? Does it really matter if Iceland is its own country or if it were, let's say, part of Norway? I don't think that these political distinctions really matter on the whole.
Well, this is exactly why we're all anti-American. This is exactly why, because Americans don't look at the bigger picture. Even people, I'm talking about people within our circles in the quote unquote movement, they don't understand what we're talking about when we're talking about these things. They are hyper focused on American sovereignty and not Aryan sovereignty.
Yeah, their tribalism is half focused. It's on the soil. Like they still, as much as they pretend to be in this movement, they're still like all about that magic soil and that 1776 mentality. Which, okay, great, that's fine, but what is it doing? What is independence really doing?
if I had to draft some sort of, pan-European ideology or something today, I mean, it would definitely have something to do with the Aryan spirit overcoming the Semitic spirit, right? I mean, so the authors of the 20th century that were writing about that stuff, I'm very attracted to all of them right now because I think that they were onto something with that. And if you were to try to find some way to kind of unite what, these people that are trying to get us to take the side of Palestine or whatever, or Iran against the forces of Zionism, well, ultimately, if there was some sort of movement to do that, I don't think it would be getting on board with these little sovereignty movements, like freeing Palestine or giving the Palestine people their own government and their own voice is kind of a gay and stupid thing in and of itself. Ultimately, that should only ever be seen as a proxy war against the Jewish world supremacy, and nothing more than that. It's not a good in and of itself.
Yeah, and if they're that also be like, okay, free Palestine, but also take all of your Arab brothers back from our countries.
Here, I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, just to reiterate it. You cannot create proxies through ideological discourse. You're not going to be able to win these people to your side through facts and logic. The only way that you get proxies is if your alliance somehow benefits the person allied to you. It's like game theory 101. You're not going to red pill all of these Palestinians into a position where they're going to go do more than what they're currently doing, and you aligning yourself to them does nothing other than harm you, because you have everything to gain and also everything to lose, and they have nothing to gain and nothing to lose from you.
Yeah, quite frankly, the more power you give to any of those Middle Eastern countries, no matter who their actual enemies are, the more power against the quote unquote West that they'll have.
Yeah, and the only people these people who think that they're going to somehow ally themselves when they have no systemic power. The only way that you can create proxy groups is through funding, by paying them to be your subordinates, to be your janissaries. You do not create proxies through debate or through aligning yourselves with them. You're only becoming their janissaries, not the other way around.
Okay, so Will, we had you and
you're
I
advocating for them. You're advocating for them when they're not going to advocate for you in return.
Yeah, Natsuck Saxon said something pretty great in the chat. He said Germanic, Nordic, Celtic, Slavic, and Med nations should form their own ethnic union states and come together as a sort of racial Euro council. And that all, basically harkens back to that collective biospirit and that collective kind of identity that they consistently try to say that we don't have, or that doesn't exist, and try to break down and divide further and further until it's basically just a mash of nothing. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, another example that I would use would be these people going, kind of leftist, mostly going on and on about Taiwanese independence. My position on this is, what does it matter if Taiwan gets some semblance of political independence, because they've got a superpower standing right over them. They're always going to be dominated by China. As long as China is this big, political entity and the superpower, they're always going to be dominated by them in some way or another. So trying to make this movement where they're their own people and they have their own, national sovereignty and independence, it's kind of stupid. It's kind of a stupid thing to spend your life fighting for, I think.
Well, they're just fighting against nature at that point.
Yeah.
And that usually, never pans out.
Yep. Well, we all kind of went around and gave our 2 cents on what needs to die first. I agreed with everything everyone said, pretty much. I mean, we can kind of dive in and dissect these things a little bit, but I definitely had strong agreement with all 4 of you.
Yeah, I would say I agree.
There was one. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other thing that came to mind was when talking about Jared Taylor, was the question of relying too much on IQ statistics and stuff like that. He often uses the argument, when bringing that up,
Oh
would
God,
justify racial differences. He talks about, oh well, Jews, Ashkenazi Jews have a higher IQ than Europeans, and then
So of course they deserve, higher representation in our nations. They deserve it.
right, and that kind of plays into some of the comments he has made regarding Jews, and he has always, and unless he's changed over the past couple of years, he's always kind of referred to Jews as being white. And when pressed on that question, he would just say that if I don't have a problem with Jews living continuing to live in America side by side with other white people, because of course they're white. So yeah, I mean, the IQ question, it kind of becomes it's very difficult to talk about identity.
It's kind of a moot point, right, Alex? Because ultimately, if we have superior IQ, that should just be one of our tactical advantages. That should be our own inherent superiority that we keep carefully guarded, not something we go and try to form a political movement on. It's like it'd be like saying that, our tribe makes the sharpest swords, and that's why we're different from this other tribe. And it's like, no. Just having a tactical advantage or like a material advantage over others, even an intellectual advantage, doesn't make you separate and distinct from that other group. That's not the dividing line between different identity groups.
Yeah, and not to speak positively of another culture, but the art of war bears that out as well. You don't want to lay all your cards out on the table and talk about everything that's beneficial and where your stash is and how many men you have necessarily.
Right, and it's like, if my identity, how superficial it is to characterize your identity with your IQ number, level of IQ. And it's like, also it begs the question is, okay, if that's the case, then why are you against importing thousands of East Asian workers to come boost your GDP? It just creates these conflict of contradictions.
Yeah, and ultimately, I don't think that this is Jared Taylor so much, him being personally weak, as much as it is the ideology that he attached himself to. This American nationalism stuff doesn't have answers for these questions, and he had to dodge them every time he was thrown those questions for like 20 or 30 years.
And I'd also say, like, we're talking a little bit about like the IQ statistics and crime stats and such shit like that, right?
That part I would agree with. Like, I mean, if you want to, there is some usefulness to it. I just say what I was basically saying is that they rely too heavily on it.
Well, I would say like I've always had this position is that like those statistics are like non-emotive, meaning they can create like an intellectual understanding or something, but there's really nothing that happens after you learn that other than you've learned a bit of information. There's no emotional reaction. There's really nothing other than a little bit of extra knowledge. And so if you try to build something on that, you're going to get like a very stale, docile, and neutered group of people that are attracted to that sort of thing. I just think that if you want to attract the right people, you have to be a little bit more strategic than that.
Yeah.
Do you know what the end result of thinking like that is? You end like Dringer was saying, neutered. You end up with a philosophy like alternative hypothesis, is where his philosophy is not racialism, it's first worldism. And I think that is the weakest, most spineless sounding thing that I've ever heard. How can you mobilize people to action by saying, oh, I'm on the side of first world against third world types of things? It's just so...
It's weak.
It's just so inept. It's so weak.
Yeah, it's 100% weak. Nansak Saxon with a great comment again. This is an issue that occurs when one's racialism is merely materialistic and not also spiritual, pagan. When you become racial on a spiritual level, it awakens something indescribable within your soul. And that is basically your biospirit, which, again, I'm advocating for. And it is true, like some of the most powerful people that I, in terms of rhetoric and propaganda and discourse I've talked to have been people racially aware to the level that they're also spiritually aware, and they realize that this is a battle that's just been ongoing for thousands and thousands of years, and it surrounds your people and your biospirit and your lands.
Totally. We got to get that guy on sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, the forum's kind of open at the end of this.
And
But yeah, like, I think the current god is GDP for the current right, and for the left, it's tribalism for everybody but Europeans. We finally need someone to find out what European really means, and kind of start advocating for that, because no one else is going to.
also culture and traditions, and like, you know, these are more primordial and emotive, as what Dringer was saying, types of positions. And like, you know, those, when you talk about those aspects, you begin really diving into the differences between these groups of people. And it's the reason why I don't want Chinese living in America. And you know,
it has nothing to do with IQ and how much money they make and bring to the economy.
Yeah.
The economy means absolutely nothing.
They would raise the GDP and they would raise the average IQ, but that it wouldn't create a world that we wanted or a country that we wanted.
100% agreed.
All right.
No
So we all did that.
I want to hear Daggis tell the story about when he almost got his ass kicked by Nate Diaz.
I
Tell
can't.
that story.
I don't want to tell that one on air.
Tell it.
That's got to be
Dude,
private.
you can tell that
hangouts.
on. Oh, come on! Is it
No.
doesn't give away too much any personal info, does it?
I gave some Hispanic dude the bird once. There's your story.
Well, yeah, we'll get into personal stories probably in an even more chill stream. I think it'd be entertaining to kind of find out what people's kind of route was to come to the conclusions that they have now. I think a lot of people ask me that question.
You want to do red pill stories?
Yeah,
I read Atlas Shrugged, and here I am.
I read 1984 and I became libertarian. This is why I am the way I am.
So I heard a Candace Owens speech in 2019. Really, in December 2019, I heard a Candace Owens speech, and then it just like absolutely radicalized me.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, these guys, you know, are the farthest right you can get.
Yeah, literally.
Don't forget Brett Weinstein.
Oh yeah, Brett Weinstein.
Is it
Oh,
May?
Jordan
It
Peterson?
May.
Jordan
Literally listening to Candace Owens for these past 4 months has brought me to this position of accelerationist National Socialism.
Jordan Peterson taught me how to wash my penis.
I was a normie December 2019.
You guys are like naming all the top people on the ADL's alt-right hate list. It's crazy.
Yeah, the real extremists. Yeah, as far as do you guys want to go down that road? I mean, do you guys feel comfortable talking about that stuff? I don't want us all to give like red pill stories and one person.
Oh, I didn't mean for that to. I wasn't serious for tonight necessarily. Maybe another time.
Okay.
You're gonna say
Unless you guys want to.
Spyro the Dragon taught me about violence as well.
Spyro is pretty based.
Mario.
That growing up.
Mario made me a lover of the Roman Empire, and that's where my position kind of came from.
No, but I will say actually some of the things that like brought me to my position, and a reason why when I do create propaganda, it is usually very provocative. So when I was in high school, obviously, there was a bunch of dudes, a bunch of nerds on 4chan that would tell us about. It would tell me, like the Holocaust didn't happen, all this shit. And then I was also reading at the same time when I was like 15, I was reading like Voltaire on God and human beings. That was my first like really Jew pill, right? Finding out about the Jews and their lies, etc. But what really, that wasn't really what like brought me here. What it was, I think it was in 2011 or 2012, was seeing this really crazy video of some new Black Panthers giving a speech, and I can't find it anymore. I found it a while back, but it's like off YouTube now. And they were talking about how they needed to get rid of the white patriarchy and that they were going to kill all white babies. And I heard that and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why are they talking about killing white babies? And that was like the point, I think it was like 2011, 2012, where I was like, okay, I got to get involved in this. I got to figure out what's going on. Why are these people talking about killing, ostensibly my children, right? Why are they talking about doing that? And so that kind of was something that like really, really started to accelerate my learning process and all that. And so that's why I believe in like emotive, like emotional and abrasive propaganda being a very important tool, because even I had a little bit of knowledge and kind of grew up in a decently like racistly libertarian like kind of familial group, but nothing really like radicalized me more than hearing these people from an out group talking about killing the children of my in group. And so yeah, that's really what really started the process.
I would say mine is pretty similar, but probably a little later than Dranger's is. I think it was 2015, like when the election shit was heating up. I started seeing people in my state getting the shit kicked out of them for being white and supporting Trump. And I was like, what the fuck is this about? And it became like a racial thing from there. And that's when I started looking deep into it, and down the rabbit hole I went.
Well, for
Yeah.
Dringer, it was babies. For me, it was watching the migrant invasions of Europe, all that stuff that happened around then, the Rotherham, the Cologne, just watching those videos of like German school kids getting beat up and smacked around on just trying to walk home from school. That for me was just too much. That definitely drew out something, that drew out some primal instincts that I didn't know that I had.
Yeah, some primal instincts indeed. I guess my racial awareness kind of started pretty early. My parents weren't like be a racist or anything like that. They were just really involved. They involved me with kind of my cultural heritage, my people's customs. Talked about Europe a lot, our homeland, our ancestors, what my name means. Read me, mythology when I was younger. So I've always had kind of this, and also like when I did something good, my dad would be like, "Oh yeah, just like a white man," and I was like, "What? What? Oh yeah, totally, I agree." And then yeah, it was. I guess that kind of started solidifying when I started talking to like one-on-one with the tribe on the right. There was a couple of people in an old kind of discourse or some group. Maybe it was even a TeamSpeak. I don't really remember, but there was a guy who was of the tribe and he was also on the right. And I was like, so you'd be okay. Like, I forgot how the question kind of got brought up, but I've asked this question with Christians too and Catholics, and the answer is pretty much the same with both groups. It was like, so if the U.S. became 99% non-white, yet still maintained that constitution and the founding ideals, which would not happen, we all know that, would you be okay with that? And 1 for 1, they said yes. 1 for 1. And both sides had different reasonings. The J was obviously like, well, there's no racial differences, so obviously like I'd be totally fine with that. And on the Christian side, they're like, we're all children of God. And like in the end, they're going to heaven and you're not, because you don't believe in Christianity. And I hate you. It was just really eye-opening. So all these things led me further and further down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
Yeah, for me, I was pretty apolitical up until about 2014, the fall of 2014, and the Michael Brown shooting was the thing that kind of got me paying attention to politics and just social issues. And I grew up in an environment where I grew up in black neighborhoods where, well, let's say they were diverse, so I kind of understood where, like, there's a difference between the way in which Michael Brown is being portrayed and the way in which most likely the encounter with Darren Wilson actually played out. So that was kind of the thing that really got me paying attention to that. And then then Trump announced that he was running, and then you had people like Ann Coulter talking about immigration, and then it kind of progressed from there. And then I focused on more alternative media like Paul Joseph Watson, and then even Milo for a little bit, for like a couple of weeks. And then I finally found some of the it was actually after the Hillary Clinton speech that when she talked about the alt-right is where I ended up Googling it the next day, and I started looking into this, and I found outlets like Countercurrents and Red Ice, and that was basically it.
You're like, I stumbled upon the ADL hit list, or not the hit list, the hate list, and I'm like, who are all these people? I must learn more about them.
Yeah, no, I heard she mentioned it was like, it's like a famous speech now. She, mentioned, she names drops the alt-right, and I'm like, I've never heard of this. I don't know what's going on. And, and then you have all these Pepe memes, and I'm like, just began digging into it. And it was the first.
Shadowlay, my fellow Kekistani.
Yeah, and it was funny. I mean, the first platform that I ran into was Fascination, and just listening to those guys talk about politics and what I believe was a more realistic way than what I was being told by mainstream politicians. So, and then I found Red Ice. I started binge watching their videos, and that's where that got me here to where I am right now.
Yeah, when I found Red Ice, I was like, am I allowed to watch this? Is this like something that's allowed on the internet?
I was watching Red Ice for more the conspiracy theory stuff. I mean, when we all talk about like red pill stories for each of us, there are going to be multiple stages, and we can each really only talk about one stage without telling our whole life story. But I was definitely, I came from the conspiracy theorist movement more or less, and I was watching Red Ice because Henrik was. He was just all over the map with being a great interviewer of different guests on all sorts of different topics. So I really have like the utmost respect for him.
100%, and he's come a extremely long way. I think he's done amazing stuff for the various movements that he's connected to.
Yeah,
well, real quick, they lost a ton of followers and a ton of support from people when they started getting into racial topics, right? A lot of their conspiracy theory following just dropped them immediately once they started talking about anything that had to do with white ethnic replacement or any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but the great thing is he bounced back, and he's even bigger. They're even bigger than ever, even after being deplatformed, which is a huge white pill for me.
Yeah, their subscriber numbers started jumping when they started talking about these issues, and like there was many 1-hour interviews which are really a joy to listen to. Germar Rudolph. There were some other individuals talking about just communism and national socialism and the Holocaust, and it was really eye opening when I first listened to those. And it's very useful for people that are just coming into this, I believe.
Yeah, Natsock mentioned that lately Red Ice has been doing more like news types of commentary streams. I really do miss Henrik's long form interviews that he used to do with intellectuals or like subject matter experts on certain topics. He was really, really a good interviewer.
And he's right. He used to do kind of deep, semi deep dives into Native European spirituality, which was great. And the blonde buttermaker, or that's her name, right? Uses a lot of symbolism that I'm a strong proponent of. And one thing
her name was the blonde baby maker.
I mean, she's both.
She's got to be both.
She does both.
Yeah.
But
butter is just a euphemism.
Oh, what's the euphemism for? Don't answer that question.
I'll leave that up to your imagination.
Okay.
That
But
does sound like Daggis is in the shower though.
Daggis has been taking the longest piss I've ever heard.
I've been experiencing some weather. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, at that, I want to throw it out there. We don't have to end it just right now, but again, this is a call to anybody that wants to come on and just talk about the topics that we discussed, any one of them, or just ask us questions. Daggis, I don't know if there's a way to throw in the link, or I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I can throw the link in the chat. I just want to make sure that some people actually want to come on, but I'll just go ahead and post the link in chat and we'll see what happens.
Also, that sounds like either a torrential downpour, or maybe you should get your prostate checked.
All right, just throw the link in chat for anyone who wants to join. I'm sorry about the noise here, but I do love sitting outside.
I thought it was
It's one of
aesthetic, and yeah, I agree about
No, it's
sitting
beautiful.
outside.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I-
Fuck
I-
with you.
I think throughout all these streams, I'm mostly outside. Sometimes I'm inside, but mostly outside.
I gotta say, guys, it feels pretty good to be outside in the rain or like a heavy downpour. I used to love going in when I was younger, like a teenager. I would always go to the jacuzzi when it was raining. For some reason, I thought that was really special. I'd always have it totally to myself, and it just felt so cool.
Well, that's very European of you, I would say.
I'm seeing from chat, like I never really listened to Red Eye, so to be quite honest. Like there was a couple things that I watched from them that I liked. Like I liked when they had John Lamb Lash on. What I liked about him being on there was that I read his books before I really even knew what he was about, and finding out that he was very much on our side of things was pretty cool. You know, because like I read like Not in His Image when I was pretty young, and so finding out that the author is actually a really fucking cool dude was kind of cool. But no, I haven't really watched much other than a few of their interviews with like select people that I like, respect, or liked.
Yeah, I think the first thing I watched from them was like in 2014. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was a conspiracy thing, just as Daggis was saying. That's kind of how he found them. That's kind of how I found them too. I'm big into like just kind of a point of interest is like the paranormal and weird stuff, and it just holds my interest a lot. So yeah, I kind of I was a big fan of them for that.
Well, and ideologically, that's where Henrik came from too, and he just started seeing the news about kind of what was happening in Sweden and migrants in his country, and started hearing a little bit about Jews and Saturn mythology, and over the course of like 4 or 5 years, he went the right direction. He manned up and accepted the truth of it rather than turning back and making it about something else.
And great personal sacrifice too. Like it was very Tyr like in his approach to that, and very Odinistic, sacrificing a part of himself for knowledge and wisdom, and expounding that wisdom to your people. It's pretty based.
So Dranger, it's cool that you came on tonight. In the future, we want to do a talk about critical theory. We're doing our research for that right now. We also want to do a little bit about Yaki somewhere down the road. So if you'd be down to rejoin us for those, I mean, you've got a wealth of knowledge to add to the conversation. It'd be super cool to get you to join in those conversations. Even if you just have to keep your mic muted for most of the time and then pop in with when you get a moment free. I mean, I think we'd all be down for that if you could do it.
Yeah, the chat also agrees. I think I saw a few sevens thrown in there when Will brought that up. So I think people like having you on there, Dranger.
Oh, me? Oh, sorry. I was away from the mic for a second. Were you guys talking to me?
Yeah, we were ball fanning you.
Dude,
okay.
we're doing some ball fanning, bro, and you just left us.
Oh, I
hanging.
missed it.
Just
You're
left us
fucking kidding me. I missed it.
Dude, yeah, man. You have to go back and listen to this at a timestamp. No, I was saying we're going to do a show on critical theory. Franklin
Right.
School. We're doing our research right now.
Okay.
Probably a couple months from now, we want to do something about Yaki. So if you could join us on those, man, you've got a good understanding of that stuff, and you're good at giving it in a succinct way. So if you want to come back on for that stuff, we'd all love to have you.
Yeah, no, actually, definitely. I really actually really fucking enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoy this. So yeah, like, fucking, just let me know. You guys, yeah, let me know. I'll fucking make time for it for sure.
Okay, cool.
Well,
And
guys,
also
I'm,
for the chat,
go ahead.
Dagus also kind of
The
spoiled
gang's back together.
Yeah, exactly. Dagus kind of spoiled the topic that we're going to be bringing up in chat and also just now. One thing someone asked in chat was, or someone in passing mentioned in chat was like, we should understand our enemies, and that's one of the subject matters of an upcoming stream is giving a full rundown and a breakdown and kind of a deconstruction, so to speak, of those topics.
Yeah, we want to get ourselves to the point where we want to be at the cutting edge of philosophy and politics, and not just be kind of stuck with a few basic ideas. We want to get to the we want to get caught up and go through all that material. And the listeners out there, if you guys are into this stuff, I think you'll enjoy it. I think we're just going to keep going down this path and see how far we can get, and take you guys along with us.
Yeah, and in the future, there's also plans. I think we mentioned at the outset that there's a couple different show names for just different subject matter. We also want to get into the more traditional stuff, the more pagan-minded stuff, the kind of mythos of our people, the history of our people, the traditional aspects as well. That's going to be another show. So yeah, we're planning a lot of content in the future.
I mean, the way that I see it is we should cover the past, present, and future. We should have some material on all of it. And I definitely don't want to neglect the past. And Grizzly, that's really where you're very strong, is talking about paganism, mythology. You're actually very, very on top of it with ancient history and that kind of stuff. So we definitely want to have some time where we give you the mic and give you a chance to go over all that kind of stuff and kind of teach the rest of us about it.
Well, for sure. Now, I'm not a long-winded speaker, so I'll welcome input and even discussion of how that correlates to the past, or to the present and to the future as well.
All right. Well, we hit 90 minutes. I'm kind of getting a bit of a downpour here, so I might have to go back inside. You guys feel? Is there anything else you guys wanted to go into, or are we about ready to wrap this thing up?
I think, well, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm about ready to wrap it up. But if there's any last-minute questions, any quick questions in the chat, feel free to post them. We'll give it about 5 minutes, and then we'll end off.
Yeah,
but
so
in the
far,
meantime,
we put the link out there a few times, and nobody's bitten so far. Nobody's had the balls to
be
hop
honest,
on stream with us. What's going
I will
on?
tell people.
To be honest, I
people,
haven't
you don't.
seen any link in the chat, Dagus.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Oh, okay.
But I will say, like, people have commented that they don't have a mic or something. You could just use headphones. Like, most headphones have like a little tiny mic on them. You can like plug them into either your computer or your phone or anything like that.
Or go outside and use your phone, because I think the platform we're using, Streamlabs, works on phones as well. So
yeah, I use a phone for everything. Legitimately, I use a phone for everything. So yeah. That's just headphones and
yeah. The quality is not
headphones.
Our concern of the mic necessarily, especially for a stream like this.
Well, if anybody out there is listening, thinking, "Well, I wish I would have gone on," well, get your balls together and come on either next week or in a couple of weeks when we do this again.
Yeah, let's give that 2 minutes. Any last minutes from the panel? Any last minute topics about what was discussed? We can kind of go around and give our. I mean, it was we covered quite a large spectrum of information, so you don't really have to get into everything in depth. But if anyone has any last minute topics, I guess we can go clockwise.
Yeah, I don't know. People are telling me to turn off my shower. Others are saying they love the rain. I'm enjoying every second of this out here, so hope it's not making the audio too bad.
No, it sounds great. The thunder rolling in the background is fucking awesome. I wish it was doing that here.
Perun and Thor and all the old gods saying hello. And
yeah, and I don't know. It's like we're going like around the circle, or
yeah, clockwise would mean starting with Dagus, but
okay.
Just go for it right here.
Oh, something I would like say is like touching back on the point of using seemingly oppositional philosophy to our own gain. I think that's actually something that we should be doing and learning about things. Like I think there's this like reactionary sentiment against like Marxist analytical theory or against postmodern analysis or all these different things. But I think learning as much as we can about those things and trying to figure out their utility is important, because as like what are we, like quote like third positionists or whatever, our general analysis and philosophy is non-revolutionary, and so learning more about revolutionary politics and the means of whether that's Marxism or, like I said, postmodernism or anything like that, I think is like incredibly useful. And for me myself, it's been very, very useful. I've been doing that for a while, but it's very, very useful and very interesting. And you kind of can reach better conclusions and predictions of where the system is headed and where the best points of friction are, right? Where the best points to push in order to create some sort of desired result. And so I think kind of like these like sentiments of ideological or philosophical stagnancy need to kind of be eradicated in favor. One second.
Whoa.
In favor of like pragmatism, as Will was talking about, pragmatic application of many different ideas culminated towards an ultimate goal. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Anything stagnant and anything proven unworkable, unless you're involved in insanity, is something that you should look past or just look at. It's kind of, I think Daggett brought this point up, and this is something that I've always kind of adhered to in the past, was you have an ocean of information, you have an ocean of data, you have an ocean of people and philosophers and topics and points of discussion and ideas. It really takes a keen mind and kind of a diligent endeavor to pinpoint those diamonds in that ocean and kind of pull those, chuck them on the shore, sort them out, and kind of use them for our benefit. And it does take a kind of a meandering through some bullshit to come to those topics and come to those nuggets in the rough, so to speak.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I would just say that, for instance, like Baudrillard or Mao is, and people might have a reaction to those words, which I think is good. If you have some sort of like reaction, it means that what I'm saying is not like a static embodiment of what you want me to say. So if you have like a reaction to the word like Mao or Marx or any of those things, then that means that those are topics that you should probably delve into and get acquainted with at the very least. I think people like that, like Marx, Mao, Baudrillard, Foucault, are more important and more applicable than, say, like some alt-right countercurrents writer, in as much as these things that are outside sources of information will not only tell you about the outgroup's thought processes, but it will also give you revolutionary analysis tools that you didn't previously have.
Yeah, well, just to back my homie who doesn't know I'm his homie, he does get into that pretty in depth as well. He's not the regular kind of countercurrents author, but I definitely get your point, and that's one thing to keep in mind is exactly what Drenger said, but also like there's only so much you can use enemy propaganda for your own ends, so keep that in mind. I think the more you delve into that, and the more you kind of promote that, the less beneficial it really is in the long term.
Well, I think I'm up next. I definitely echo what Drenger says about understanding Marxism, postmodernism. Us as a group, we're going into that now. We're headed towards that direction. And by the way, I've been wearing noise-canceling headphones this whole time, so my computer just died for a second. I took them off, and I couldn't believe how fucking loud it was out here. So thank you guys for putting up with all that noise. But yeah, with that topic, I guess what I want to say about it is currently we live in a postmodern era or a post-truth age. We're in this information/disinformation age where there is no objective standard for truth, and we also have these. We're kind of living under the shadow of these intellectuals. These J intellectuals that we kind of hate, and I think that to understand the spirit of the times, we have to understand them, and there's a lot within those philosophies that we can leverage. A couple weeks ago, we did a stream, and we talked about how, or at least I talked about how, my understanding was that Foucault was basically a mix of Nietzsche and Marx, where he basically took Nietzsche's will to power and then melded it with racial oppression politics. So it's interesting though, because that's the world we live in, right? The world is becoming more and more segregated down racial lines, and we have to understand the zeitgeist of the time to be effective in our own time. And I think that I think that we need to have some subtlety as we go out and try to understand these thinkers. And I know that when some leader of ours goes and starts talking about Marx, people are going to get really uncomfortable, and a lot of the followers out there are going to go, "Do I really want to follow this guy anymore?" But at the same time, if we're trying to be kind of higher minded and really have a solid understanding of the world around us, we have no choice but to delve into those ideas as well. So that's my piece on the topic.
And at least understanding them, not necessarily. Again, I think someone said in the chat, you can use your enemy's beliefs against them without actually buying into them, and that's 100% accurate.
I think it should be even like stressed that you shouldn't buy into anything at all.
Yeah, or blindingly buy into anything, or it's. I mean, I basically agree with what you guys have said. Like, don't if you look into these authors, learn about what they have to say, and that helps refine your arguments. I mean, it helps actually put your arguments in perspective, and that gives you ammunition for arguing in an effective way for what you actually believe, and it's very useful. And I don't like sort of the knee-jerk reactions. And also, I mean, a lot of people post about they post these memes or these distortions of what some of these authors might have said in the past. Like, I've seen like people were criticizing Duginism. I haven't read any of Dugin's works, but I have a little better understanding of like what he has said in interviews, and like some of the things that people are saying about him really are kind of it's not really encompassing of what his viewpoints are. And it pays to actually read some of the things that they have said, and I highly recommend doing that. It helps it helps you build sort of your knowledge base, and gives you a better ability to critique them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first barrier to actually understanding something is having the idea that you know everything about something already. So being completely in favor of what you know necessarily. I mean, not that you can't be confident, or not that you can't know things. I'm not saying that, but thinking that you know everything there is, and refusing to look into something is equally as bad as basically endlessly discovering things and never having an actual viewpoint to offer.
Yeah, I would say don't forget that the powers that be are constantly studying us and trying to understand us. They accept this idea that you must know thy enemy in order to defeat them. So don't let them be the only ones analyzing our philosophies. We've got to go out and do our own intelligence work and understand them if we want to defeat them. And also, inevitably, when you do any deep research into any thinker, you're going to find some points of agreement with them. So that's something that it takes a little bit of I don't know what to say, a sophisticated mind to be able to say, okay, I do agree with some parts of what this person is saying, but X and Y. And you're not going to get that from your common rank and file grunt. But
if Arminius refused to use the information he had about military tactics from the Romans, he never would have wiped out 3 legions
Yeah,
And then use
exactly.
words.
There's nuance to it. And I think there's this like misconception that people have, like if you like an author or if you read an author that you immediately become the like, resurrected embodiment of whatever idea or philosophy that you're interested in or learning about, when in fact what you're doing is becoming a better, a more knowledgeable person, right? And you don't necessarily agree with and or accept every axiom or assertion that they make. It's just a learning process, and people shouldn't be afraid of going through that process.
Yeah, I agree with that. Will, any takes on? Oh, Will's not here. Oh, Will's
No,
back.
he's back. He's back.
Will, what say you?
Oh, muted. Well, it seems like he's having some technical difficulties.
Okay, well we can. So I think we answered any questions in the chat. Was there anyone in the waiting room?
Nope. I think it's time to wrap this thing up. You wanna outro us?
Sure. Yeah, I want to give a big thanks to Dranger, Alex, for coming on. Alex has been a regular, which I really love his input. It's really unique. It's insightful, and I appreciate you coming on all the time, Alex. Dranger, you're obviously a big fan favorite in the chat, so I'd love to have you back on. Again, you were with Willivar, Dagus, and Grizzly, and we'll sign out for now. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you guys.
Have a good night, guys.